Hi, I'm one of the members of the examining team of ATX Hong Kong variant. In this webinar, I'm going to share with you some key exam skills which hopefully may be helpful for you in attending the ATX Hong Kong variant. This webinar is going to take 5 sessions. First, I will briefly talk about how ATX is different from TX in terms of syllabus. Then I'd like to draw your attention to the new exam structure taking effect from June 2023 and thereafter. In sessions 2 and 3, I'll give you some reminders about what you need to take care of before and during the exam. Last but not the least, in section 4, I'll try to give you some ideas about what are the points in the mind of the markers when they are doing the marking by using an example. At last, just a few takeaway pointers before we end the webinar. Syllabus and exam structure. Syllabus from TX to ATX. It is not my intention to go through the detailed syllabus of ATX here. Instead, I would like to highlight what are the major differences comparing TX with ATX. Under TX, you would need to develop the knowledge and skills relating to the Hong Kong tax system, such as property tax, salaries tax, profits tax, etc. Just like doing the puzzle, you would need to know the different shape of each puzzle piece, whether it is square or rectangle or round, whether it has the straight or curved side, etc. Then what's next? The puzzle pieces alone do not mean anything until you bring them together to form a meaningful pattern, like a picture. For ATX, we expect you to bring the puzzle pieces together to form a 3D model. In doing this, you would need to apply the TX knowledge in different scenarios to help on financial decisions and situations. The journey from TX to ATX is just like doing the puzzles from puzzle pieces to a 3D model. Here is an illustration of how the knowledge of rental income can be examined under the TX and ATX respectively. For TX, we will simply ask you to use the information given and your property tax knowledge to do a property tax computation to arrive at the tax payable. However, for ATX, we will give you a scenario and ask you to advise on the tax implications. Remember, computation is not the focus of ATX. If any, computation will only score a few marks. Here, in this case, you would need to apply property tax, profits tax, stamp duty, as well as PA in handling this scenario. And what's more, you should do an evaluation by comparing property tax with profits tax, and thereafter form your opinion or conclusion at the end. Both questions can be answered with good TX knowledge, but ATX requires you to apply the TX knowledge to a given situation involving choices and decision making. I have another example here extracted from ATX December 21. In this case, you are given 4 cash generating ideas, meaning that you are given 4 options. The first option relates to shareholder funding by way of loan or equity. Loan involves interest income on one side and interest expense on the other side. Equity involves dividend payout on one side and receivable on the other side. Under TX, you may be asked to do a profit tax computation, and you need to think about whether tax adjustment is required in the tax computation in relation to interest expense or dividend payout. But on ATX, we need you to give a written advice. Tell us, what is the difference between interest payout and dividend payout on the company side, and what is the difference between interest income and dividend receivable for the shareholder? The second idea is on the disposal of warehouse, and also the fourth idea on the sale and leaseback of trademark. Under TX, you will only focus on how the warehouse disposal is to be reflected in your tax depreciation allowance schedule, or how the trademark disposal and the royalty are to be adjusted in tax computation. However, for ATX, we expect you to explain the principles in words. For the third idea on change of accounting date, this topic is excluded from TX syllabus, but now it's examined in ATX. So please make sure when you do your study for preparation for ATX, you must include some of these topics which have been excluded from the TX syllabus. Just like report format, you would need to present your answer under ATX in a format required, such as a report format, in order to gain the full marks for the professional format. The cutoff date for the examinable legislation. Basically, we follow the 30th September rule, meaning that for the papers for June and December sections in 2023, we will only include the legislations passed on or before 30th September 2022. Please make sure that the study materials that you are using are up to date. This slide gives you a very important message that the exam paper will look a little bit different as from June 2023. On the left-hand side, it is the current structure adopted for December 2022, and the new structure is shown on the right-hand side, effective June 2023. First, the total time for the whole paper remains the same, 3 hours and 15 minutes. However, under the current structure, Section A will contain 2 questions with a total marks of 60, and the 4 report format marks will only be required for question 1, and the balance of 56 marks are all assigned on technical contents. However, under the new structure, there is only 1 question in Section A for a total 50 marks. Technical content is now reduced to 35 marks only, while 10 marks are assigned for professional skills. That includes the 4 report format marks as before. A new component, ethics, is now added, which worth 5 marks. I'll talk about professional skills in further details in next slide. For Section B, under the current structure, there are 2 questions with 20 marks each. However, under the new structure, Section B would also have 2 questions, but each question will now worth 25 marks. However, out of the 25 marks under each question, only 20 marks are assigned for technical content, which is same as current. The balance of 5 marks for each question are assigned for professional skills. As a summary, under the new structure, total marks for technical content are only 75 marks, and the balance of 25 marks are assigned for professional skills and ethics. Let's look at what kind of professional skills are expected of you. For professional skills, altogether there are 4 elements: communication, analysis and evaluation, professional skepticism, and commercial acumen. For communication, basically, this is highly similar to the 4 marks of professional report format under the current structure. But other than the report format, we will also be looking at whether your answers are clear enough, relevant, and whether they are specific to the question requirement. Analysis and evaluation. This is to assess your analytical skill. Marks will be awarded if you can demonstrate that you use the information given to do your analysis. When you give your conclusion, whether your conclusion is reasonable and whether the judgment is appropriate. Professional skepticism. Basically, this means that you are expected to maintain an attitude that you will doubt or question on anything given to you, whether they are true, useful, or valid. For example, if you are given an idea to change the nature of a taxable payment to a non-taxable compensation, then you should be able to demonstrate to the markers that you actually doubt about the validity of this idea, and you are able to criticize that this idea may be subject to challenge by the tax office based on substance over form. Commercial acumen. We need you to demonstrate in your answers not only technical ability, but also commercial or practical sense. For example, on the idea of changing the nature of a payment, you should be able to remind the taxpayer that this is subject to investigation by the tax office, and this investigation may lead to potential substantial damage to the company's image. All the 4 elements of the professional skills will be covered by question 1 under section A, but only the last 3 skills will be covered in question 2 and 3. Pre-exam. How you should get prepared for the ATX exam. In your preparation, you should focus on not only technical but also non-technical tips. For technical, of course, you should make sure that you master well the TX knowledge in terms of what to do and how to do. For ATX, you must go beyond the TX and master why to do. That is, you should know the reasons behind the tax computation adjustments, and you should learn how to explain the principles in words. For topics that are excluded from the TX syllabus, such as stamp duty, make sure that you include them in your study for the ATX. Honestly, hot topics are more frequently examined. You must spare time to study the past exam papers. Check what topics are frequently examined and how a principle is presented in words. You are also advised to read the past year's examiners' reports in order to pick up some common errors that are frequently made by previous candidates. I'll talk about some common errors in further details in next slide. On the non-technical, you are strongly advised to go to ACCA CBE practice platform and practice how a CBE ATX exam would look like and how you should deal with it technically. In studying past exam papers, you should also pay attention to marks allocation, format required, etc. If you're preparing for June 23 session and onwards, please take a look at the specimen paper that we have prepared for you and made available in the ACCA website. You should get familiarized with the new structure, in particular the professional skills. When studying the past exam question, my sincere advice to you is you should do the question yourself before reading the answers, and then try to mark your scripts based on the marking scheme. It is totally normal to make mistakes. You must learn from your mistakes. If you simply read the question and answers together, you will have a misperception that you know all the points mentioned there. However, in my experience, this does not mean that in the actual exam setting, you will know what points are exactly required to be included in your answer. In the next slide, we will learn some of the common errors extracted from the prior year's examiners' reports. Prior examiners' reports, common errors. While it's wise to learn from experience, it is wiser to learn from the experience of others. We've extracted just a few key examples of technical and non-technical common errors that most candidates made in the past exam section. One of the common misconceptions is that students thought that an income is taxable if it is deductible on the other side, or vice versa, the so-called asymmetrical basis. But this is incorrect. Take interest income as an example. Candidates thought that interest income is non-taxable if the amount is not deductible by the payer. However, this is not correct by concept. As for the interest expense, students have also mistaken that interest on loan to finance capital asset would be capital in nature and therefore not deductible. However, this is not consistent with Section 16, subsection 2 under the Hong Kong tax law. General deductibility rule is also another common error of misinterpretation. Under the rule, expense is deductible if it is incurred in the assessable profit of the same person. However, some students often mistook that an expense is deductible if it is assessable in the hands of the other side. The last item of technical common error is the non-up-to-date tax rates. This always happened when there is an update of the tax rates or some other areas in the tax system. So please make sure that the study materials that you are using for preparation is up to date. Some examples of non-technical common errors include copying from the question without explaining. For example, in the situation, you were given an item of bank interest income. In your answer, if you said bank interest is tax exempt because it is from bank, obviously, you were just trying to spell out the tax computation adjustment of the bank interest, but you were not trying to explain why the bank interest was not taxable. What you should have said in order to gain marks is bank interest is non-taxable or tax exempt because of 1998 exemption order. Sometimes answers given were not relevant. For example, some students may spend time to talk about accounting treatment of certain items instead of tax. Inappropriate format, for example, report formats, have been used in most of the years under question 1, but still some candidates did not get it right. Another common error is that candidates used to jump to the conclusion without explaining why. It's difficult for marker to give marks. In examination, that is, what are the key things that you need to pay attention to during the examination? Before answering the question, there are a few reminders that I would like to highlight for you. First of all, time management. This is very, very important. Exam time is 3 hours and 15 minutes, which includes 15 minutes reading time. That means you actually only have 3 hours, that is 180 minutes, to complete the paper to get 100 marks. That means you should spend 18 minutes for 10 marks. The 18 to 10 rule. When you start to answer a question with only 10 marks, never allow yourself to spend more than 18 minutes. I would advise 15 to 10 rather than 18 to 10. That is, you should only spend 15 minutes at most for a question of 10 marks. This should allow you more rooms for any unexpected disruption that may pop up in the later time. Be clear to the facts given. Read the requirements carefully and set the priority as to which question is to answer first. My advice is to go for the easier first. You are not required to follow the sequence of the question, but make sure that you specify clearly which part of the question is now relating to the answer given. Always stay alert of the time remaining which appears on the screen. Whilst answering the question, always think before you write. Be specific, give relevant answers, focus on the format requirement and professional skills. Always start the question on a new page. Use simple English. For example, there is a man, full stop. He has a pen, full stop. This is totally acceptable in ATX exam. If applicable, Try to use paragraphs with subheadings or numbering. This would make it clearer and easier for markers to read. To score a mark, first of all, you have to bear in mind that ATX focuses on words, not numbers. So, explain in words. Tell the markers why, but not repeat the facts given. Focus on the key points. And when you are asked to give opinion or evaluation between options, just say what you thought based on your analysis aforesaid. If you are uncertain whether the analysis that you gave in the earlier part of the question is correct or not, do not worry. Just give your opinion based on your own analysis. In marking, we follow the follow-through rule. That is, if you give an opinion based on an analysis leading to a position, you will still gain the marks on the opinion, regardless of whether your analysis is correct or not. We will not penalize your choice. Professional skills. From June 2023 and onwards, professional skills actually account for 20 marks of a paper. These are the 4 areas that have been discussed in the previous slides. I'm not going to go through them one by one again, but just a soft tip. It's not too difficult to earn marks on these elements. We now come to section 4, read the minds of markers. Let me advise you that during marking, markers cannot read your minds. You have to tell them what you think. I'm going to use an example to illustrate how a question is being marked. I'm using question 3 of June 2021 as an illustration here. This question involves a Miss Wong who has a leased fully furnished property in Hong Kong. She is negotiating a sale under 2 options. There are 4 requirements. I'll quickly run through them one by one. Requirement A of 5 marks asked for property tax implications as well as the tax liability. As this is an ATX paper, you should not expect all the 5 marks will be allocated to the property tax computation. We expect you to spend some time to explain the theory and the law. Let's take a look at one candidate's answer extracted here. Those key points are being circled in red and marks given. Unfortunately, the definition of NAV was not given, therefore this candidate was losing a bit of marks. This candidate continued in his answer by giving a property tax computation, which has been done very well. And this part was well done by most of the candidates. So in this case, the full marks of 2 has been awarded to this candidate. Some other common errors found in other candidates include the wrong treatment of premium, and also we were surprised to see that some candidates gave income and expenditure accounts or statements instead of property tax computation. Part B asked you to suggest ways to minimize tax liability. That implies that the current scenario must have got some problems. What you should do is to identify the major problems before you can find out how to deal with the problems. Major problems include the service charges, management fee, etc., being the non-rental payments, which are to be included in assessable value under property tax, and the payment of mortgage interest is not deductible under property tax. To answer part B, this candidate was able to gain some marks on suggesting electing PA in order to obtain the mortgage loan interest deduction. Actually, on this part, most candidates have performed well and gained the marks. However, for suggesting ways to reduce the property tax liabilities, we've got some very creative tax planning ideas. For example, this candidate was suggesting to specifically written in the contract that all the expenses are liable to the tenant and not the landlord, etc. Now, this suggestion was not within our marking scheme, but still 1 mark has been awarded to the student because it demonstrates to the marker that at least the student is aware of the problem with the non-rental income and was trying to suggest ways to separate the non-rental income outside the current rental arrangement. As for other candidates, some ideas were creative but not realistic or practically feasible, such as some suggested not to sign the lease agreement to save tax and stamp duty. Strictly speaking, this is not practical nor ethical. As from June 2023 and onwards, actually, you can make use of this situation to gain some professional skills marks under commercial acumen. For example, you may say something like, despite stamp duty would not be payable if the written instrument is not signed, it is not practical in this case to suggest the landlord not to sign the lease agreement, as this will not give sufficient protection to the taxpayer as a landlord. If you say so, you will gain some professional marks under commercial acumen. Part C of 9 marks asks for stamp duty implications under each of the 2 holding options. This candidate was able to gain some marks on the key points which were circled in red here, but still the answer was not comprehensive enough. Probably it appeared that this student was lack of sufficient knowledge about stamp duty had won. So he apparently has mixed up scale 1 with scale 2, leading to wrong conclusion. Okay, but you can see that still he was able to gain some marks on the key points which were correctly mentioned here. The last part of this question of 3 marks requires candidates to comment on the effectiveness of option 2. Under option 2, by using a company to earn rental income, both property tax and profit tax would potentially be payable. We expect you to be able to address this problem. This candidate was able to mention about profit tax and therefore gain some marks on this, but unfortunately forgot to mention about the property tax. Moreover, This candidate has spent some time to talk about stamp duty, which has actually been examined under Part C. At last, we would like to mention that in some other candidates' cases, we found that quite a lot of candidates did not give an overall conclusion after doing the evaluation. The question requires you to comment on option 2, so at least you should wind up by saying whether you think option 2 is effective or not based on your analysis. So if you are taking the exam for June 2023 and onwards, you have to be careful that if you say the conclusion as to whether you think option 2 is effective or not based on your analysis, you will be able to gain some professional marks. This webinar is coming to the end. In the previous slides, we have spent time to address quite a few important issues which are relevant for you to prepare for the ATX exam. Before ending, I'd like to emphasize 3 takeaway points. First of all, set a higher aim for yourself. You should aim at going beyond tax computations. Tax knowledge that you learned under TX is just like puzzle pieces. We need you to bring them together to form a 3D model under ATX. Explain why, demonstrate how, evaluate the pros and cons, and learn to judge. Secondly, practice past papers. And thirdly, review the prior year's examiners' reports. It is always wiser to learn from the experience of others. I hope you find this webinar helpful. Thank you for listening.